Welcome to this WACE Academy online lesson on the Reflex Arc. This lesson covers Unit 3, Central and Peripheral Nervous System, Point 4. Today we'll cover what the reflex arc refers to and what its function is in the body. Then we'll go through each component of the reflex arc and explain how the different structures contribute to this function. The reflex arc refers to the pathway that your nerve impulses take when your body performs a reflex. Reflexes are involuntary and happen incredibly quickly. For example, you pull your hand away from touching a hot thing before you can even register that it's hot. The way the reflex arc is structured is key to allowing this reflex to happen so quickly. We can view the reflex arc like a path that your nerve impulse, which is an electrical action potential, travels along. The general components of a reflex arc are the receptor and the effector. The process a reflex arc follows is: a stimulus will cause the nerve impulse to move from the receptor to the effector, which will cause a response. The most interesting thing about the reflex arc is that your brain is not part of it. This is what makes reflexes so involuntary. You can't control them by thinking about them because your brain has nothing to do with it. This is also why reflexes can happen before you even notice why it is they have happened. Your brain figures out the information after the reflex has already occurred. Let's go through the cell types involved in the reflex arc. First up are the receptors, which are little bits at the end of the nerves called sensory nerves. Receptors can look different depending on what they are designed to react to. For example, if you were to put your finger into a flame, a thermoreceptor would be the first one to notice. Thermoreceptors are divided into heat and cold receptors, which are both connected to the same cell. They combine their information to give a better estimate of the temperature. However, if you were to look into a bright light, this would be sensed by photoreceptors instead. Photoreceptors are also divided into two types with specific functions: rods, which sense light and movement, and cones, which sense color. So once the receptor has sensed the stimulus, the message is passed on to the main part of the sensory or afferent nerves. These are nerves that are designed to carry information towards your spinal cord from your receptors, like a telephone wire that only goes in one direction. The sensory neuron carries the nerve impulse into your spinal cord, where it is passed on to the next member of the reflex arc. The interneuron is a short nerve cell that lies inside your spinal cord. It is a point where the nerve impulse starts to turn around and head back out towards the part of the body the reflex will occur at. It takes the signal and passes it into the motor or efferent neuron. The motor neuron is another one-way telephone line type pathway that carries the signal back out to the effector. The effector is whatever the motor neuron controls, whether it be a certain gland or a muscle. In the case of your finger and the flame, the effectors are the muscles in your arm, which will quickly pull your finger up and away from the source of heat. If a reflex arc only has one sensory and one motor neuron involved, like the simplified example I just explained, we call it a monosynaptic reflex. However, most reflexes involve many sensory and many motor neurons, and we call these polysynaptic reflexes. Even though more nerves are involved, the speed of the reflex remains the same, and the signal still does not pass through the brain at any point. Alright, that covers today's content on the reflex arc. Today we talked about how the reflex arc is the path that a nerve impulse will travel during a reflex, how reflex arcs do not involve the brain, and the structure of the reflex arc including sensors, sensory nerves, the interneuron, motor nerves, and effectors. That's all for today's lesson on the reflex arc. Next time we'll talk about nerve impulses. Thanks guys, and see you next lesson.